Fantasy football does not have to be that hard if you just study what has worked every year of the Best Ball Mania era. That and more with Hayden Winks today.
It's Short King summer, dude. It just feels like no one in fantasy sports ever learns anything. Does he mistime it, or is Brock Bowers just a grown man? Brock Bowers is just a grown man. Dare I say, Rich, football might be back. In the words of Lane Johnson, this offense looks constipated. It's Short King summer.
All right, GM Hayden, my fellow mustache brother. My man is about to be on corporate retreat with Underdog Fantasy, but stop by today. We are going to talk some general roster construction stuff for your best ball teams. We are going to talk about rules of thumb. We're going to talk about some deep data dives that Hayden has done with what I guess suppose the Best Ball Mania API data from the past. So about as good as it's going to get in terms of analyzing the data. Hayden, how are you enjoying the very beginnings of hot best ball summer?
Yeah, it's been great, and I'm glad that we're doing this show. We focus on the players so much on our channel over there, and like I do all this writing, and thankfully you guys click on those, but I don't get very many chances like sit here and go through all of the numbers and the data and the charts, and I get asked about it a lot. So I'm glad that we're going to go through a bunch of it.
Yeah, I'm very excited as well. So you are the man that needs to be approached this hour, because no one has greater insight into the running back and wide receiver wars, Hayden. I mean, let's just be real. That is what it is. You can see a very clear trend line here. So for the audio listeners, these are graphs based on Best Ball Mania 1 through 5, where wide receivers have gone in early rounds, mid rounds, the late round versus running backs. And I mean, Hayden, we're all trying to find the people who did this, but right about in Best Ball Mania 3, yep, there is just an absolute, I mean, convergence is not even the word. Convergence would be reaching equilibrium between the positional distribution, but somewhere along the lines in Best Ball Mania 3, the Underdog Fantasy football community just decided wide receivers are the way, the truth, and the light.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that was like the part of the season, or the part of Best Ball Mania, where Kyron Williams and Devon Achane late round picks were like literally the only guys that mattered. So the zero RB data was really good in there. And then we saw a lot of people play into that with just the way that ADP has shaken out. But yeah, the moral of the story is, to me, it's the price tags do matter here. We'll have different eras where running backs, you needed running backs early, you needed wide receivers early, and that will kind of flip flop over the years. But I think ignoring price tags does explain a lot of like what the dead zone is. Like no one even talks about the dead zone anymore, because it's been completely priced down into now like those guys around 7, 8, 9 selections instead of round 3, 4, 5 selections. So to me, like the price tags would be different. And I didn't even include BBM 5 right there, where, I mean, if you weren't drafting running backs in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the numbers would be off the charts. It was like the biggest discrepancy of the 5 years. So the point of this column was like, all right, we know that there's going to be some years where you needed a lot of early wide receivers. There's going to be some years where you needed early running backs. And obviously, if you lean into those strategies and that's the year, like you're going to do very well. But what has worked in all 5 years, like even though there's been different outcomes, there's some strategies that have worked in literally all 5 of the years. And if we kind of stay on that trend line, I think we can kind of like deviate from it when we want to, but it's like kind of setting like a good expectation of like what works no matter what the outcome of the season, I do think was a worthwhile thing for me to do.
And we are going to get into that. So we're going to do positional quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. But real quick, I do just want to talk a little bit about methodology, because obviously the first iteration of this article, when you published the data, that actually it was optimal last season to have had 0 wide receivers through 7 rounds. I mean, it sounds crazy when you say it. And obviously, you know, that's not true when you get to the playoffs. And there's a difference between analyzing what you need weeks 1 through 14 versus what you needed in weeks 15, 16, and 17. But I think you actually, I think you sort of buried the lead right there, which is that the number one key in these exercises is to be price sensitive. It's not just wide receivers over everything. And the right response this year is not, well, I should definitely take Joe Mixon over Jameson Williams because Joe Mixon is a better fit in 0.5 PPR scoring, and running back scored all these points last year. But I think like a great example of this is I'm trying to Rashad Bateman last year, or the fact that I looked this up the other day, going with Corain, the running back 11 in Best Ball Mania 1 was the 1.12, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say the wide receiver 50 didn't even go into like the 12th round or something. We now have the wide receiver 50 going inside the top 100 picks on Underdog, which is not to say, I'm not saying that's right or wrong right now. But what I am saying is that when you have these conversations in a vacuum and we talk about the wide receiver apocalypse last year, part of the reason why there was a wide receiver apocalypse, yeah, the injuries were a big part of it. Rashee Rice getting his knee detonated, Godwin smashing and then getting hurt, the running backs not getting hurt. But a huge reason is the further up the draft board you draft your guy, the higher the point scored, the weekly scores needed for him to justify that position. So I think key number one is just price sensitivity.
Yeah, especially because the flex spot is up for debate between three positions. It's largely running backs and wide receivers, but tight ends can get into the mix as well. And I do think the projection at the price tag does matter specifically for that flex position. And I think back 3-4 years ago, it was always like, we have to win the flex. And every single time the follow up to that statement was, you put a wide receiver into the flex. And that is just wrong. It's just wrong. And
it's empirically wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. And if a lot of people and a larger piece of the drafting pie starts building with wide receivers in mind for the flex, the pivot is just to draft a couple more running backs than you otherwise would. And right now, I think that we're even seeing some of the tight ends later on where all of a sudden they're kind of relevant because their price tags has dropped so much. So all this is to say the current projections for this upcoming slate matter a ton as well. I think that was kind of the downfall of elite tight end last year, where we were kind of just putting guys into this elite tight end conversation who probably didn't belong there versus a lot of the absolute Hall of Fame studs. So I think kind of putting the wrong guys into categories will kind of lead you astray as well. So yeah, there's each position's way different, but to me, it always comes back to the wide receivers and running backs. You got to figure out in rounds 1 through 7 or 8, how much are you leaning one side or the other? Because that's a huge part of what's going to win that year.
So we should talk about what has worked for wide receivers, because I think it's too easy to focus on what happened last year, too easy to focus on, specifically the 2020 and 2021 seasons where passing went nuts. These are, on Hayden's research, what has worked all 5 years of Best Ball Mania. Having 3 wide receivers through round 6, having 4 or 5 wide receivers through round 10, and having 6 to 7 wide receivers before round 18, which is going to be controversial. And I hope that we have, and we are actually just going to go ahead and discuss through that, because I think it is really interesting, particularly having 6 to 7 wide receivers through round 7, and we can work backwards from there. But I think a huge key is in best ball, nailing running backs, tight ends, quarterbacks with your round 18 pick. Truly, I think a lot of I'm going to take Elijah Moore and he's going to break out. How much money has Puka Nacua actually cost people by being a round 18 wide receiver hit? But I think this is a key rule to lock in on.
And I think especially in the 2025 landscape, where the rookies right now, you can make a debate that the rookie wide receivers are some of the worst picks versus their projections right now, where 5 years ago when we would have some of these hits, Amon-Ra St. Brown and stuff, those guys were being completely undrafted. And I think we learned our lesson that, okay, we got to price up the rookies more than we did previously. So I think it's just going to be harder to find that round 18 wide receiver to completely dominate right now. Yeah, fifth round rookie like Puka Nacua can come out of nowhere, but for every one of those, there's 100 guys that people are drafting that end up being bad. So to me, it's just in half PPR, some of the upside case. And I think a lot of it's just helping your advance rate. Drafting that third quarterback is going to help your advance rate. Drafting that third tight end helps with the ping pong effect at a very volatile position week to week. So I think there's better ways to kind of spend your draft capital. And this goes back to even the first slate of Best Ball Mania. Remember, that was when everybody was drafting 9 or 10 wide receivers. And that was because I think a lot of people PPR in that era. And I think
so but also Herzig, for the very first Best Ball Mania, he drafted 4 running backs, one of them being Alvin Kamara, the 6 touchdown game. And everyone then spent the next offseason aping the strategy of the team that won, which is honestly, I mean, I think you could still get away with doing that sometimes with different positional distributions. But I think that the big key you hit on there is people mistake the idea that all the money is in week 17 for being, well, I shouldn't care about advance rate. And I think Leone has done a great job explaining why that is not optimal, which is week 15 and 16, basically random. I mean, you can say you can control it, you can stack week 16, but let's just be real, man. It's I have no idea what's going to happen in week 1 relative to now. I really don't know what's going to happen in week 16 relative to right now. So I think that adding in that extra tight end, adding in that extra quarterback, and particularly, I mean, how much of pushback to your stuff is people not understanding half point PPR scoring?
I mean, that's like, it sounds so basic, but it's like a lot of the things I'm talking about, just like, just half PPR, every receiver is losing like half of their value. Like it's for receptions, which is like 30, 40, 50 points per year. Like that's a huge portion here. And I think a lot of this data just comes down to like the fundamentals of diminishing returns, and you can't over invest into any one position is basically what the research shows across positions. And I think right now people have been drafting too many wide receivers. And I would especially say if you're drafting like 4 wide receivers by round 6, which is like, you could totally do that. You can even do 5. But I think on those builds, people have been drafting too many wide receivers. And I think in those builds in particular, which have been very strong in certain builds or in certain seasons, you have to actually use those points. And I do think that the ping pong effect also matters here for the playoff weeks, where if you only have 2 tight ends or 2 quarterbacks, I do think that you run into some ownership issues down the line. Like if those 2 guys are the guys that you needed in week 15 and 16, and obviously through the regular season as well, you're going to run some huge ownership issues where that third tight end, that third quarterback could be like the low owned guy to kind of make you differentiate as well. So I just think in general, people are drafting too many wide receivers, and especially the people that are like investing into that position heavily early on. Like you just need those guys to like be in your wide receiver and flex spot. And like you can't like be adding on Jalen Cokers and those types of those builds.
So it's actually an extension of the draft like you're right mantra, which is
if
you were right to have selected Tyreek Hill, Chris Godwin, Rome Odunze, Trey Harris, and Marvin Mims, you probably don't need Devon Vele on that team. It's probably suboptimal. And just to further some analysis here, I've been doing this because I get a lot of pushback on just being like, I'm taking a running back round 18 every time. What you have in front of you right now is single seasons from 2010 to 2024, all wide receivers drafted in rounds 5 through 7. These are the best fantasy seasons in the last 15 years compiled by day 3 picks. And St. Brown is on this list as well. I just typed a 5 instead of a 4. But you've got Puka, you've got Tyreek, some incredibly extenuating circumstances with Tyreek Hill, where he basically, he was the same guy he was in college that he is in the NFL. Teams got sick of him. People thought he was maybe going to be undrafted. You've got Darius Slayton. You've got Denarius Moore. Diggs, to be fair, did actually go on a nice little run. He didn't start the year as a starter. Outside of that, you were looking at guys who like peaked. I mean, what just in general in the last 15 years, even in full PPR, there have only been 14 guys who've added 100 points in full PPR. Do you know how easy it is to find a running back who adds 100 points in half PPR? Like, I believe Ty Johnson scored 89 points last season in half PPR. You just are so much better off taking these running backs.
Yeah, and also just say the tight ends in the last couple rounds, like not even last couple rounds, from like rounds 10 on in half PPR, out project the running backs and wide receivers straight up. So if you're a firm believer in the positional scarcity part of the tight end selection, which I think we can debate right now, like the best projections, like in rounds 14, 15, 16 on average, are just like straight up the tight ends, because like those guys are like not leaving the field. So I think that also kind of matters here. And okay, where can I find guys that are going to contribute to my lineup? And like, okay, so if I do think that there's going to be a lot of tight ends later on that are the best picks, then I really can't be drafting them too early, or otherwise I'm going to be allocating too much draft capital to one position. So like you have to like take the picture from like who's available all the way through the end of it. And if we don't believe that there's going to be that many good wide receivers in round 17 and 18, then yeah, we do have to draft enough of them early on. It's just figure out exactly how many you need to draft. And that's why I think like zooming out like through round 10 is kind of something I've been paying attention to a lot more, where 4 or 5 wide receivers gets the job done. 4 or 5 running backs through round 10 also gets the job done. And that makes sense because that's typically 0-1 quarterbacks, 0-1 tight ends. And I think those two positions right now in round 17 and 18 make a lot of sense. Like Rodgers, Daniel Jones, Theo Johnson, Jawan Johnson, there's Jatavian Sanders. Like these guys are like just going to be on the field like a ton versus a lot of the running backs and wide receivers. And yeah, you can find the low owned guy, like maybe Zach Moss with an injury. He's being undrafted. He's the guy you needed, but there's a lot of swings and misses down in that era.
I mean, you're much more likely to swing and miss on quarterback, wide receiver, and running back than you are. Like, sure, Aaron Rodgers probably going to start 17 games, but also he might not because he's a 41-year-old quarterback returning from an Achilles injury. You've got Jackson Dart, you've got Tyler Shuck, you've got Sam Darnold, just like huge, crazy, wide ranges of outcomes. Guess what? Theo Johnson and Jawan Johnson and like Tyler Conklin, these guys have super narrow band ranges of outcomes. They are like, I mean, I was actually just saying this morning in the Discord that like Jawan Johnson is 0% to be a league winner and Brashard Smith is like 0.01% to be a league winner. But Jawan Johnson also has 0% to be a 0. Brashard Smith is like what, like 70% to be a 0, 80% to be a 0 or something like that. So yeah, and you want to vary that. I mean, I don't think you want to be taking Jawan Johnson every time, and I don't think you want. I would actually get pretty nitty with exposures there at the end. Like if you have 9% of Chig right now, I would be moving that to like, well, one, you want to take Gunnar Helm maybe once every 20 drafts instead. But I don't want to be overexposed there, but those guys are like firm locks to not be 0s.
And I think a lot of this discussion is like finding that top 5 percentile outcome, which is like obviously the name of the game here. I'm not like ignoring that, but also that does not mean that all 18 of your picks need to hit a top 1 or 5th percentile outcome. We're talking about the entire team needs a top 1 to 5 percentile outcome through all these stages through Best Ball Mania. And that does not require your 18th round pick to be a super smash. Like if Jawan Johnson, and by the way, Jawan Johnson 2 years ago finishes the tight end 1 in week 17.
He was
the tight end 1. Like this does happen, guys. Like these random tight ends, they can score 2 touchdowns, and like that could just be it. Like we've seen this with like Daniel Jones has finished probably as a quarterback 1 or a quarterback 2 in a week throughout his career. Like I think that's possible. Like
he was a quarterback 11 just overall,
right.
The one good season. The reason, I just will say this real quick, the reason why Jawan Johnson can't be a quote unquote league winner is when I'm saying league winner, I'm saying not the guy who spikes in week 17. I'm saying that guy's the story of the season. Yeah. I'm saying he's the Puka, he's the A-Chain, he's the Kyron, he's the whoever that might be. All right, we kind of need to get to the elephant in the room here, which is 2024 running back scoring. A lot of things going on with running back scoring. The first being points scored in the NFL went from, in 2020, 49.5 points per game. So that's both team scores added up to 43.5 last year. So huge drop. It was the first time in like the modern era of football, going back to the 1990s, that rushing plays were positive EPA plays in 2024. You got the cover 2 safeties, you got the shell coverages, a lot of bad quarterback play, right? I don't expect that to go year over year, but I would say a clear key is that the Slappy community just kind of forgot that running backs score points too, particularly when they stay healthy. Like just because 0 RB is a viable philosophy doesn't mean running backs will get injured. And when they don't get injured, all those points you're imagining Keaton Mitchell scoring, Derrick Henry just scores them instead because he's pretty good. So what were some of your key takeaways for running back scoring?
I'm starting to write like a regression piece, and what you notice on like the running back data is a lot of the like positive EPA that you're talking about is just Saquon Barkley going to an offensive line that can actually provide him space. Derrick Henry going to an offense with Lamar Jackson to create space for him. James Cook breaking out because he has Josh Allen. There's like 4 or 5 running backs that like made up a huge portion of like the positive EPA, and then everyone else is kind of the same. And unfortunately right now, like Saquon's back, Derrick Henry's back. I would say like Josh Jacobs in that category as well. So yeah, but I think zooming all the way back over the last 5 years, having 2 running backs through round 6 has been an above average strategy in all 5 outcomes. So it hasn't necessarily been the best outcome every single year. Obviously, we've had some crazy 0 RB years where you definitely wanted 0 running backs through round 6. Last year, even having 4 running backs through round 6 was very advantageous. Having 3 was like pretty much optimal. But every single year, 2 running backs through round 6 gets the job done at above average clip, which is shocking because you start 2 running backs. Like all this stuff going back to the wide receivers. What was it? 3 wide receivers through round 6. You start 3 wide receivers. You start 2 running backs. We'll get to the quarterbacks and tight ends. It's like it almost follows exactly to what the scoring system and the lineup system is on Underdog, and that just goes to show you how important diminishing returns are. Like you can't overinvest into any one position. So yeah, I don't know if it's going to be 3 running backs through round 6 is optimal, or 2 or 0 this slate, but I do know that if you do have 2 of them and those 2 running backs do stay healthy, that's going to be a winning strategy in general. So it was just like the big takeaway for me when I was doing this whole thing is just like we have a starting lineup, and invest because round 1 players project better than round 2 players, which project better than round 10 players. Like kind of taking a balanced approach here, which has been kind of like, oh, you're a balanced approach guy, like kind of mocking that side of the equation. Well, it actually just works because diminishing returns is like a literal law.
It's a great point that completely disregarding projected points, which was actually to sort of bring it full circle. This was actually the opposite of the slappy point that I remember Ben Gretsch making on that fateful episode of Ship Chasing that kind of got us to where we are right here, was that actually the mid rounds were where you start to see the market disregard projections, that you started to see these running like super dead zone-y backs being overdrafted over wide receivers with this crazy ceiling. And then things just got there being a massive discrepancy there. And as in all things, we went too far. We went way too far into, dude, if you don't have 6 wide receivers by pick 90, you're dead. You got buried in the avalanche. And it turns out that I suppose you got buried in the running back quake instead, which is what happened. And then another point that I've been actually trying to hammer home, one, you have that the optimal rate is having 5 running backs through round 18. Something that I have actually been really playing with as it pertains to projected points is a lot of the times I get to the end of these drafts, I have a 2, 6, 7, 2. And you can like, well, I could take Jackson Dart here. I could take another tight end. I could add on, Jalen Coker to my Bryce Young stack. I could take Jalen Royals or whatever. And a lot of the times I am actually just thinking, you know what? It's half point PPR. One of my running backs probably is just going to bust. One of my running backs is going to get hurt. It would be awful nice to give myself another lottery ticket at this year's Bucky Irving and Chase Brown are too high of a realm. How about this year's Kareem Hunt, right? How about a guy who just via attrition and randomness ends up scoring 9 touchdowns? Because as is pretty clear, and you can kind of understand fantasy football everywhere through this lens, which is that wide receiver targets are earned and running back fantasy points are given. You don't really have to do anything to get them. I think Ezekiel Elliott is sort of the poster boy for this, but I do like adding that 7th running back.
Yeah, I would do that if you're building a 0 RB team, and I would not do it if you've invested anything in the first 4, 5, 6 rounds. It just really comes down to like these bars that I'm kind of like 5 or 6, and then I write about like on occasion 4, on occasion 7 does matter. But it's because of the investment early on. So it's just like I kind of created these like thresholds, like you should like stay in these, but there's a give and take to it. It just really comes down to like how much investment do you have early on. So yeah, 5 running backs have had an above average roster build in all 5 years of Best Ball Mania. Sometimes it can be a 6 running back on a 0 RB year. I think that 7 RBs is probably way too much. And then I think that 4 running back builds is actually pretty interesting. And that's something I have experimented with a lot, because there's the last couple seasons. There's been some times where having 4 running backs for like 6 or 7 rounds, 8 rounds, especially with like the price tags dropping, just like my 4 I have 4 running backs through round 8. All 4 of them stay healthy. That's it. Like, that's all I need. And I think that that should be kind of in the mix a little bit. But it just comes back to the diminishing returns part of this. Yeah. This chart was insane.
So yeah, when it was optimal to draft running backs in 2024, 0 running back was bad. 4 to 5 running backs was optimal through round 10. But more importantly, the biggest shift in strategy and why so many people who drafted like I did just got absolutely smoked was that no early wide receiver, really, other than Jamar Chase, even Justin Jefferson didn't really separate. I mean, Justin Jefferson continued to average. I mean, the dude scored 10 touchdowns and had 1,500 yards. And it's like, oh man, I really wish he could have been better this year. So let me provide a non-charts based argument for the 7th running back, which is that these teams actually are going to project pretty bad. Not bad, but not as good as if you added a 3rd quarterback or a 3rd tight end. I mean, let me tell you, you want to get on the Underdog app and have a team that Hayden's projections there in the app say is sharp, add a 3rd quarterback, add a 3rd tight end. You're going to be perfectly normally distributed. You're going to be projected to win your pod. The reason why I like the 7th running back stuff in half PPR best ball, like I think managed is a totally different conversation, but it's that I do accept the diminishing return, and I do accept that I'm probably going to lock in some suboptimal weeks, but I think you greatly expand your chances of actually hitting the week 15, 16, 17 nuts, because I think the market is so relatively sharp right now that, like, imagine the current best ball environment in the Puka Kyren summer. Puka would not have been 40% drafted. Kyren would not have been, he would have been a 14th round pick, right? It's just a little bit too sharp to find those values. But something you can't prepare for is, oh my God, Deneric Prince re-signed from the USFL. Every other Miami Dolphins running back got pneumonia and he's starting. So I think that taking these, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a wide receiver. People really are taking these Seattle guys, Horton, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I think I've seen a Ricky White pick in the wild, and it's like, I get it. I get the impetus to be like, man, I just need another lottery ticket there. But that lottery ticket, you have to jump through so many hoops, and the biggest hoop is this guy even good? And you don't have to jump through all those hoops with the 7th running back. So that's the argument.
Yeah, I would just say, like, that's the argument for the 6th running back, and that somewhere along the line there, you should have just drafted a different position earlier before that. So yeah, like there are some low owned running backs that could absolutely matter here. Like I threw out Zach Moss. I think that he's one that could go back to being somewhat relevant. But yeah, I just think that for as much as people scroll down, the hit rates on those are so low. And even when you are right, like maybe nobody in the finals has that person if you scroll down far enough, where it like didn't even really fucking matter because like, oh yeah, he was drafted 19 times across Best Ball Mania. He was the guy that you needed, but guess what? None of those 19 teams actually made it to the Best Ball finals. So yeah, I think a lot of these charts kind of like account for that in the averages a little bit. But I would only do 7th running backs if like it was like the most crazy like hero RB where it's like, all right, I drafted one guy and then like literally my last 6 picks were all running backs. But I think if you look at the projections right now, it just seems like you're like sacrificing too many projected points for like this, like what could happen. But like you could have just like had a more balanced team, and like the wide receiver in round 17 catches 2 touchdowns in the finals, and like that was the guy that you needed. Like Darius Slayton could be like the wide receiver 10 in a week, and maybe you just needed a wide receiver there. So you just can't cover all your bases. Like
you can't, it's only 18 roster spots. You can't cover all your bases.
Yeah. What am I supposed to do here? Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a really good point. I think it is a really good point that if your thought going into the draft is I want to perfectly allocate my capital exactly and leave with a team that is beautiful screenshot equity, week 17 upside, it's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we've had teams win these tournaments that you look at. I did this exercise when Karain won. I remember to go back and look. Every week 17 highest score in each round, so round 1, 2, 3, all the way through 18, and you just pick the guy who finished there in ADP who had the highest week 17 score, and then look back on it and say, would this team have advanced? And the answer was no.
Yeah.
The answer was that it would have been really unlikely to advance. So even if you had the perfect week 17 score, absolutely no guarantee that you would be able to backfill a team that would advance.
That's well, on that note, that's where I'm kind of on the Leone side of this, where, advance rate, I know the goal is not to advance, the goal is to win the whole thing. But in order to win the whole thing, you do need to advance. So like, to me, like the advancing through the regular season does really matter, because the rest of it wouldn't matter. That does not mean I just draft olds and never draft a rookie and never to consider back weighted production and stuff. Like, yes, all that stuff does matter. But if it's like the only thing that you care about, I think that's wrong. And I do think that in order to get there, you do have to advance through. So it should absolutely matter, in my opinion.
It should absolutely matter. There is no reasonable way to argue. I'd rather have 14 teams of low owned guys that just kind of got through for whatever, versus I'd rather have 30 teams of a bunch of chalk ass guys who smashed in the regular season. It's actually, and it's not even close. It's like, I remember talking about this with Leone once, and I was like, at what number would you rather have, like, you're the only guy who advanced Elijah Mitchell versus, and you got 16 teams through, right? Versus, okay, this guy advanced 17 teams and it's all chalk. Well, would you trade portfolios? Or this guy advanced 8? And Leone was like, it's when you just start to do the expected value exercise, there is basically no way for uniqueness to come up for just having another team.
Yeah, I think that there's like pockets to get unique. Like, I think that the early round 2, like, kind of going to the other side of the board. And I saw Eric Beinford's like screenshotted his Jamar Chase teams. And if you look at his ownership on those teams, it's all players on the left side of the board, because that's where Jamar Chase is the first overall pick. So I do think that there's some ways to get unique where you're sacrificing a little bit of projected points. Another example I always talk about is I don't draft that many guys with like an ADP in like the 15th, 16th round, because they don't project all that dissimilar.
All that better.
To like a guy with like a 210 ADP.
Adam Thielen versus Jalen Coker.
Right. And like 210 is like, these guys are like actual like functioning NFL players that like could get on the field and like theoretically score points. But a guy with a 210 ADP does not get drafted nearly 100% of the time. But I think a lot of people fall into the trap of, I need to find somebody with a 215.8 ADP. And I think, to me, you're scrolling too damn far. And a guy with like a 212, 213, 214 ADP is already well down in the drafted rate, where we're talking about 5-10% drafted. And once you like talk about like advancing these teams and who's even going to show up to the final, a 5% drafted player, if he is the guy you need in week 17, you've already chopped off so many damn teams to get there, where there will literally only be like 1 or 2 or 3 people with that exact player, unless it's like the Puka season where like he's like an actual god. But I think people are scrolling down too far. But I do think that uniqueness does matter, like in a couple spots. And to me, it's like the round 2, round 3 guys where you kind of flip the board. And then it would be like, don't draft a round 16 player, just draft somebody that like gets drafted a quarter of the time in round 18.
Well, you know what's interesting about, honestly, like kind of every pick, like the only guy I've seen never fall, I think, is Jamar Chase. But I've seen the second round drafted in kind of, I've seen, Lad McConkey go at 13. I've seen, JSN go at pick 25 there. Like, I think it's a combination of fantasy managers are a little bit more unsure about kind of all these guys. And there's like weird individual things in the first round that allow this to happen, like CMC injury uncertainty. Some people are like, I'm never taking a Raiders rookie running back in round 1. That's just like a rule they would have, So it sort of builds on itself. But I just find it like, I don't think the Bime, for example, of, like this year, let's say Jamar Chase replicates his season from last year. I think you will basically see kind of other than Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride and T. Higgins with him that are so obviously correlated, I think you're going to see a really random dispersion of Garrett Wilson, Terry McLaurin, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, just like almost like a total random group. Because I would guess, and you would have to do this kind of information, like I don't even know how you would get this, but I would guess that because ADP is not the perfect number. Like what would I guess the median distribution or the mean distribution of how wide the bands are of where guys go would be wider in Best Ball Mania 6 than they've ever been before in the second and third round. That's my guess.
I can see that just because uniqueness and stuff, it like does matter. And obviously our marketing budget gets bigger, and then you get people that have never like watched content like this before. And like those people are probably going to be more likely to reach. So yeah, there might be something to that. But like the example I would say with the Jamar Chase is Josh Allen's ADP is at 34, which is like always on the other side of the board. And a lot of Jamar Chase drafters are praying now that Joe Burrow like falls all
Gets
the way
to 6-7. Yeah.
If you just draft one of the elite quarterbacks in round 2-3, like how many Josh Allen, Jamar Chase teams are there going to be? There's just not. Like there's like little examples like that where you can get unique, and you're not really sacrificing that many projected points. So it's not only about projected points. And I know it seems like a lot of people think like that's the only thing I care about. There are like some instances where I would kind of get away from that, and that was one of them.
All right, we're going to skip past the tight ends and come back to it because I think tight end is a position that's so much made up by what happens year to year. Actually, like I think it's actually of all the positions, it's making hard and fast rules there is basically like, well, how many touchdowns is the guy who went number one over? Travis Kelce scored 6 touchdowns, bad pick. He scored 12, awesome pick. You were really glad to have him. So let's go to quarterback. 3 things have worked every year. Drafting your first quarterback before round 14, waiting until round 8 to draft a quarterback 2. So not doing, Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, and waiting until round 15 to draft a quarterback 3. Now, I have to ask your take on the best ball cabal has really latched on to something because Sims are getting more popular now. And people are starting to be able to conceive of points added to a roster. Where do you stand on 2 versus 3 quarterbacks as the base optimal rate?
I like 3. I do 3 with an elite quarterback. If you look at the projections right now, the like low end quarterback 1 mix, like the Baker Mayfield kind of range, doesn't project all that dissimilar from Matthew Stafford. He goes way later. So to me, like if I'm doing elite quarterback, a lot of the times, sorry, it's like Jaden Daniels plus Matthew Stafford plus Daniel Jones. And I think that's totally defensible. Especially like with Jalen Hurts, like he's now a 5th round pick. So like the opportunity cost is already getting lower and lower. It's not like we're drafting Lamar Jackson in the 2nd round. Like each additional pick down the board for these elite quarterbacks does end up mattering. The last couple of years, you can see like the pink and the blue at the end right there. You can just see the difference between 3 quarterback, 4 quarterback builds versus 2. And that's been the case even, I think, the last 2 years, even before that as well. I also just think that there's like a little bit of a game theory reason why this could be the case. It's just when you're talking about like 7, if you have 7 wide receivers, 8 wide receivers, 5 or 6 running backs, these guys are ping ponging. There's just like more guys to ping pong weeks back and forth. So I think that the roster rate in the finals is going to be a little bit flatter at those positions, where at tight end, like let's say it is George Kittle, elite tight end George Kittle goes crazy in weeks 15 and 16. He's going to be on a huge amount of teams just because there's like fewer tight ends, where let's say you did draft George Kittle, you want like 2 more shots at like a low like ownership guy in the finals. I would say the same thing at quarterback. Like Jalen Hurts back-to-back in weeks 15 and 16. You want your Jalen Hurts team. You want like more quarterbacks because you actually want like Jalen Hurts to like not be that great. And you want 2 darts at a guy that's going to be a little bit lower as well. So I think, and then the other reason would be, let's say like Jalen Hurts is having a insane season for a 5th round draft pick, but he misses 4 or 5 weeks in the middle of the year. Like you want to like have the ability to like survive.
It's what he does every Jalen Hurts has missed week 16 each of the last 2 years.
Yeah, but let's say he missed all of October, but he's shredded in September and he's going to shred in December as well. Like I think that you want to survive some of these elite quarterback teams where I think historically we've been like a little bit too fragile with them. And there's definitely some scenarios out there where like the elite quarterback was, for pockets of the season, was absolutely the guy that you needed, but that 3rd quarterback does matter. And the last thing I'll say on this was it matters what part of the year as well. Right now, because we don't have training camp news and we don't have like better estimates of who's going to be the actual team running back 2, who's actually going to be the wide receiver 3 on some of these teams. Right now, I feel much better about Aaron Rodgers contributing points for a round 17 and 18 pick. Maybe on Labor Day, I have a really good feel for who's the Bengals RB2, who's actually the Cowboys RB2. Is it Miles Sanders, or is Miles Sanders now been cut? Like these examples.
Is Miles Sanders just the starter?
Sanders? Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
So really, who knows? But that means like Jaden Blue was a bad selection. But I just think that right now, early in the season, we have a lot more information on who the damn starting quarterback is going to be than we do at wide receiver and running back. And I would say make the same case at tight end. Like there's really not that much tight end depth chart news. Like most teams like have a starter, and the wide receiver 3 on a team, that's usually way more up for debate because like the talent has diminished. Same thing with the RB2. So I think that earlier on, I'm almost always going to be drafting 3 quarterback builds. So that's kind of where I'm at on it right now.
So there's a couple things going on there. The first being, zero optimization early on, May, June, first part of July before training camp. Super strong, right? Just avoiding, I'll never forget it. Ball Mania 1, I fell in love with this former Texas Tech wide receiver, Dylan Cantrell, who was who was like the wide receiver 6 on the Chargers. And I just didn't have a clear understanding of what best ball, like I'd played on draft, I'd played on MFL 10s, but like, we just did not have the data and the knowledge that we have now. So I was like, this Dylan Cantrell, dude, I'm just and like, he never heard from him again. I don't even think he ever played in the XFL or anything. Like it was like, for all I know, the dude is working at like Northwestern Mutual right now. And then a great example from when we did know more about best ball is Clyde Edwards-Helaire from last year, where something that you think is relatively safe, not like locked in safe, but people are like, oh, CEH, I mean, at least he'll be the running back 2 on the Chiefs, right? Was not the running back 2 for the Kansas City Chiefs. The players who are going to provide you the safest non-injury stuff are quarterbacks with some kind of guaranteed money, right? And tight ends. Like there's really not a scenario where I'm trying to think of the worst tight end. Michael Mayer is like tight end 40 on Underdog. He is not going to be a league-winning pick at all. Michael Mayer is going to play about 47% of the Raiders snaps this year. I'm not telling you to take this guy, but I'm telling you that tight end roles are so clearly they're not tight end training camp battles that can be won and lost the way there is at the running back position. So I think that it's been very interesting to see it happen in drafts because over like the last like week or so, our friends over at Legendary Upside, Karain and Shady, did a big stream talking about Shady's sims that were like, oh, 3 quarterbacks. Easy has done easy DFS.xyz did a study 2 years ago that found like the amount of points added by a third quarterback is like more than the average wide receiver 6, all this stuff. But what's interesting is that the dog can chase its own tail with that, because if everyone gets pushed up and, oh, you got to take Matt Stafford in the 13th round. Oh, you want Jackson Dart? You have to take him at 157. You want Tyler Shuck? He's 163. So it'll be very interesting to see how those things balance each other out over the course of the season.
Yeah. I'll also even mention that a quarterback doesn't even have to start all 17 games to be worth it in round 17, 18. Like Russell Wilson has 3 sweet games and then throws 6 interceptions the next 2 games and gets benched. Like the 3 games that Russell Wilson's like potentially contributing to your roster, like it does matter. So yeah, like obviously we want our guys to be out there for week 17. Like that's better than not, but it points like helping your advance rate like does still matter a little bit. And I don't think that, let's say like everyone kind of pivots towards 3 quarterback builds. Do you think that's going to affect Matthew Stafford's price tag, or is it just going to make like you said, Tyler Shuck, he's now a 16th, 17th rounder rather than like a coin flip to be drafted? I think like that's probably going to be where the difference is going to be.
No, I think it absolutely will. I think that if Matthew Stafford becomes a key part of your build, even if you don't have Cooper Kupp or not Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams or Puka Nacua, that then there is a corresponding thing, because some people even before the cabal got into the 3 quarterback experience was like, I always want 3 quarterbacks. And then sometimes your draft capital dictates it. Like, oh man, I got sniped on Baker Mayfield, then I got sniped on Caleb Williams, then I got sniped on Trevor Lawrence. So I just need 3 quarterbacks in general because I don't have the firepower. That will absolutely be a cascading effect that will make Dart, Shuck, Rodgers, Daniel Jones, all those guys more expensive, 100%.
Yeah, in for everybody to have 3 quarterbacks, that's 36 quarterbacks. There's 32 starting teams.
Four teams miss out basically.
Yeah, or like Russell Wilson gets drafted 100% of the time, where like right now that's like nowhere near the case. Like what's Russell Wilson's ADP like exactly right now? It's like probably 214.6 or something.
214-ish, yeah.
Yeah, like he's being drafted 10% of the time, like where that now he is actually drafted 100% of the time, and he actually goes up a couple of spots. And like we have to take Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. Everyone knows this. Dart and Russ are getting drafted. Like maybe that's what the future is. But yeah, and there could be a season where it's Jaden Daniels and Brock Purdy, and like you don't need a third quarterback like that. Those are well within the range of outcomes as well. So you don't have to. You got
to ping pong the weeks pretty good.
Yeah, that's where I think like the third quarterback will always matter in the ping pong effect, because I just think that a third quarterback is like giving you a little bit more ping pong effect than the 8th wide receiver. Like there's more likely a chance that just the top 7 guys have already ping ponged it enough for you, where like a first and second quarterback, that's not ping ponging this thing enough. And I think just having the advance rate data kind of point that direction as well, plus the ping pong effect theory, I think that makes it a pretty good strategy right now.
All right, so let's take a look at tight ends real quick before we hop into a draft. So when was it optimal to draft tight ends in 2024? Where did Brock Bowers go? That was when it was optimal to draft I guess, was there another super advance rate tight end last? I can't really think of one.
Not really. They all sucked.
They all sucked. Bowers was basically the only good one. Historically, it has basically been 3 tight ends is fine. You kind of want 1 tight end before round 9. The 2 early tight ends has never particularly been good. But I mean, this headline here, you can sub out Travis Kelce for Rob Gronkowski. You can sub out Travis Kelce for Mark Andrews. You can sub out Travis Kelce for Brock Bowers, for Trey McBride. The number one, Jonnu. Jonnu is the answer for the other advance rate tight end pick. The number one thing that you can do is travel to the future and determine how many touchdowns that the tight end 1 and tight end 2 score. Because let me tell you, if McBride runs hot on touchdowns this year, McBride scores 12 touchdowns, I'm going to guess he was the best second-round pick. If Brock Bowers has a combo Travis Kelce Gronk season and he just scores a touchdown a game, I mean, you're going to be stone dead without a 16.5 point per game season tight end. But what are your general thoughts on how to handle this position?
Yeah, I think that historical data at this position it's almost pointless, because it just comes down to the projected points over replacement for this position versus the guys being drafted around them. And yeah, it's really hard, because this position is also the position that's most tied to touchdown scoring, because they catch the fewest amount of passes and they don't add any rushing value. So a huge part of their profile is just playing the touchdown variance game. So it makes it very hard to even like nail down the projections like you were talking about there. I guess I think the only thing I would like really add to this discussion is there are 16th, 17th, 18th round tight ends that have like turned out to be like the guys you needed. Darren Waller was a nobody before he was a superstar.
He sure was. Yeah.
Yeah. Like where was like Sam Laporta being drafted? There are some examples of like a nobody tight end coming out of nowhere. Jake Ferguson was not so long ago was undrafted.
Jonnu was around 18 pick last year.
Right. Like I think that people are like, oh, late round tight end, like they were going to give you some points here, but they're not going to be the guy you need. Like there are some seasons like Darren Waller was like the guy you damn needed, because he was undrafted or nearly undrafted, and then all of a sudden was like a top 3, top 4 weekly finisher at the position. So there are some examples, even with quarterbacks as well. Like Bo Nix was like a super late pick, and he was
late round quarterback who runs. I mean, that is writes itself. Like it's why Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones are both turbo ass, but are still like
you got to pick
defense. They're defensible clicks. I mean, I think Richardson is probably cooked, but that is more of a personal thing than an archetype thing. And I mean, basically, you can see in 2023, elite tight end was quite bad. Why was it quite bad? Travis Kelce didn't score any touchdowns. Mark Andrews didn't score any touchdowns. That was really bad years for both of them. 0 tight end roughly worked. Optimal to have 2 to 3 tight ends. It's never up. Like 4 tight ends is so brutal. I would just
If you scroll down to last year, though, you can start seeing some of the four tight end teams start to creep up. So
I wonder if it's because they had Jonnu.
They had Jonnu. Also, every single time somebody was drafting an elite tight end, you said, okay, I'll take my Joe Mixon points. Okay, I'll take my Alvin Kamara points. I'll take my Saquon Barkley points. I'll take you name the wide receivers that were actually good picks in the early rounds as well. So like the differences that you're making up for as well. So yeah, if it's the position that is correlated to touchdowns the most, and those are very volatile week to week, it does make a little bit of sense to me where if you really want to punt this thing off and add a fourth tight end and like now you have four guys to kind of ping pong touchdowns with, I do think it's defensible, especially right now where the last 6 rounds of drafts, the tight ends are projected for more points than the wide receivers. And I think you can even make the case like the 9th round, 10th round tight ends and wide receivers. Like, I don't know, man. Like, how confident are you that Jack Best scores more points than David Njoku? I'm not. So there's some examples of that. And I know the theoretical upside and stuff, but
I like Njoku a lot. But yes.
Well, Tucker Kraft, he has plenty of upside. He's young. He's been very efficient. He's on a good team. Like Tucker Kraft has a lot of theoretical upside. And I think that his median projection, like who are the 5 wide receivers going right in front of him? Like it's some really suspect names, like veterans and some rookies. So yeah, I think that there's some validity to this.
Where do you stand on the Bowers wars? This is a real good people on both sides for Brock Bowers in 2025. Where do you stand?
He's really tough because like he might be so good that he just like straight up matches the round 2 wide receivers like on catches and yards and touchdowns this year. Adding Geno Smith, who I think is actually good, is like a big damn deal as well. I do want to mention, though, when you start looking at the points over replacement, and it's not a perfect metric, but I do think it does solve a lot of our problems. Let's say it's the wide receiver 40, which is kind of like there's 36 starting wide receivers, a couple of those guys hit the flex. You compare like wide receiver 40 baseline with the tight end 12 baseline, and we're talking about like both of them are averaging 8.8 fantasy points per game. So I think that's gets a little bit tricky with the tight ends matching the wide receivers in terms of scarcity. I think I like Trey McBride more at cost because I just think it just comes down to the touchdown regression. And I think there's a chance that he could just go absolutely nuts. And I do think there's a little bit of a difference between the wide receivers at the 1-2 turn versus the 2-3 turn. So I'm kind of leaning more like saving my elite tight ends for Trey McBride, and I'll see about Brock Bowers.
Just you're a big you're a regression guy.
I'll have a 7% Brock Bowers right now, but I'm glad that
7% exposure blanket.
I'm glad that he's in round 2. I did for a second there think that he was going to be the 9th overall player, and at that point I would have probably had been tweeting that I'm not drafting Brock Bowers, but I do think there's a difference.
All right, some big key takeaways here to end. Reaching for your guys. It's very unlikely that you're that much smarter than ADP. One of the things you'll find, and I remember doing this with you on a show a long time ago, is just like the idea of consistently disregarding ADP in like the top 100. I guess you're going to get really paid off when you're right. If you had 100% Barkley last year, you'd feel really good. Although I guess not in the end because he didn't score. What was it, week 15 or week 16 when he sucked?
You still feel good about it.
You still feel good about it. Doesn't work. And then the Galaxy braining roster construction. Yeah. Uncommon roster constructions. People love to talk about it, but in practice, it's really, really doesn't work.
Yeah. There's just so many different combinations of players that like every team built is already fairly unique that I don't think that you need to have a 5 quarterback build. So like, yeah, this chart was just showing like, all right, how many people are like building this quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end team? And like the more common ones were pretty successful. And then when you think that you've solved best ball with some crazy build, it can work. It's just usually unnecessary. You're taking on a lot more risk than what's needed to win these tournaments. Like you just like kind of like need a well-constructed team and then like hit on the right guys at the right time, like all in the same lineup. You don't need to like win with a unique roster construction that nobody's kind of considering. But I think the drafting players early versus ADP, there's really just like not that much of a point, because on those Saquon Barkley teams, like you would still want him like at ADP or after. And same thing with like anybody that's broken out. Like you still want, like I would rather have 25% of an exposure, and I'm always getting it in like fairly good rather than like 60% of exposure. But on all those teams now, I don't, instead of having a 4th round pick, now I have only have like a 5th round pick, because I keep reaching. I think like that stuff it's pretty bad. And yeah, like I think for like the most part, I'm going to have like 25-30% of a player. And when I do have a stand like that, it's usually a little bit later on. So yeah, I don't think you should have like too much of a single player, but I do think you should have some player stances. I'm not an 8.2% bro, but yeah,
8.2%. It's tough. By the way, this is a 30-second Best Ball Mania. If you guys are wanting to hop in, we need 5 more. We're going to draft the team. We're going to get out of here. Hayden is going to go record the fantasy football show with Hayden and Josh. I'm going to go do ship chasing here in a little bit. These 30 seconds take forever. Let me tell you, one of the biggest life improvements that Underdog Fantasy has ever done for me is the addition of the 20-second clock, both from my own time and when I am streaming by myself. Just like unbelievably strong. The math is that if everyone in a 30-second draft takes the entire time and you opt to do a 20-second instead of a 30-second, it saves you 36 minutes of your life.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Compound that up over the summer.
Yeah, it's really a big deal.
All right, we have got pick 3. What's your favorite here at pick 3? Are you happy to take Jefferson? Are you hoping that you're in a room with a slappy and that you get Barkley? What do you like to do at 3?
I mean, I'll take Barkley if he falls. I think I'm gonna be like a 45% Christian McCaffrey, bro. I think speak on that. Speak on that, Hayden. If he stays healthy, he's going to be one of the best picks, period. Like he probably, like I was talking to Lord Reeves and he has him projected over Saquon Barkley straight up. Like if he stays healthy.
Well, anyone who does projections, look, all absolute respect to you if you do projections, but absolutely zero respect to you if you have Saquon Barkley projected for more points per game. Mm-hmm. All right. So we can't take Jefferson. We can't take. I'll do whatever you want. You don't get to drive in the BBM streets that much.
Let's get weird. Let's go with Christian McCaffrey. Let's do it.
Bang.
Let's do it.
Normally I would overrule you and just take Justin Jefferson there because it's just another Justin Jefferson team. But who knows how many times I'm going to be able to get Hayden on the stream this summer. And frankly, I have been ahead of market on McCaffrey since January because of this little factoid right here. So this is over the last, I call this the Best Ball Mania era. So this is since BBM1. These are all seasons with over 20 points per game. I mean, you can choose not to count the 3-game 2020 season. So 30 points per game in those 3 games, 29.4 in 2019, 24.4 in 2023. You might say, dude, this guy sucks. I mean, only 3 of the greatest 5 fantasy seasons. And then Christian McCaffrey, again in 2022, in a year he got traded. I mean, it is self-evident. This dude is the greatest player in fantasy football, and people are fading. I don't get it.
I'm looking at the comments right here. And I think people are getting this wrong. So I did want to mention this. So they're taking my don't get crazy unique with the roster constructions. Like don't draft 10 wide receivers just because you think it's like some unique build. I think that's bad. But I do think that the combinations of players in these huge tournaments does matter. And Christian McCaffrey right now is the example. The entire time he's kind of been on the other side of the board, and we just flipped the board around. So it's like the discussion I just had in round 2, you're just now doing it with a round 1 player.
And furthermore, the other thing that we said doesn't work is giving up projected points to get your guys. Guess what? We are not giving up any projected points. We are actually gaining. We are gaining projected points.
Mm-hmm.
So Yeah, it's incredibly straightforward. The only reason that anyone would not be taking McCaffrey would be fear, and fear-based drafting is very unlikely to do anything for you. I mean, McCaffrey in any reasonable projection is going to be projected for, 13, 14 touchdowns, 1,800 scrimmage yards, 1,900 scrimmage yards. He, there was Levitan tweeted this out today. It's been going around. He was the only 49ers running back out of all of them to participate in all drills. He didn't miss a single rep at all.
He's healthy. It's June. He's healthy. And last year's injury was a short-term, he was overused issue. And obviously that's a bad sign in general, but he's over it. The Achilles tendonitis is not a thing right now.
Yep. Now, I mean, it looks like we are caught a little bit here in a slap room. We got Rashee Rice at 20. I think in this spot you take T a little bit ahead of ADP. What do you think?
I like it. Yeah, that's good with me.
Yeah. I mean, I am not falling all over myself to take T Higgins. He's the classic. He did good last year, so he's a second round pick. If he does bad this year, we're sending him right back to the gulag in the 5th round. I think there's a pretty big tier break actually between him and AJ Brown and Ladd. And frankly, if I was doing truth serum, probably a pretty big difference actually between him and Rashee Rice in terms of median outcome.
Yeah.
But it's totally fine.
Yeah, he also had the most contingent value of any of these guys in round 2.
That's true.
So I think that has to matter a little bit.
I'm fine with your boy McBride here. I'm fine with Tyreek. I'm fine with whatever you want.
Yep, McBride. This is the perfect example. We stayed Trey McBride's been at the 2-3 turn the entire time. Same thing with T Higgins. How many T Higgins and Trey McBride teams have Christian McCaffrey in round 1? Right now, it's not that many. Maybe in the future it will be a larger portion of that, but that's a combination that's lower owned, and it definitely projects just as well, like you mentioned. And even if Christian McCaffrey, let's say Christian McCaffrey is a consensus 4th overall player on Labor Day, we're going to have unique combinations just based off the timing when we're drafting this now versus other times. So,
well, actually, I bet it projects better. And I don't know. I just have Mike Clay's stuff pulled up in the background, not because I think Mike Clay is the greatest projector of all time, but because it's free and I can Command F on his sheet. And most other people who do projections, it's harder to Command F, so it's harder for content. Trey McBride, 259 PPR points. We just drafted him over Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson, 241 PPR points, so that's a point per game in the favor of McBride. Again, not saying that's a guarantee of anything, but it does show you that actually, and I think the case is same with Bowers as well, and probably Kittle, that these guys are actually getting underdrafted based on their projections because they play tight end. Sam Sherman had an interesting thread on that the other day about how having tight end eligibility is actually bad if you frame it in a certain lens, that Bowers would be drafted higher at wide receiver, which is kind of interesting to think about, because there are more wide receivers started, so the barrier is higher there.
Yeah, you just look at the wide receiver 40 versus the tight end 12, they score the same amount of points on average. So if you're looking at an over replacement level, the starting point's about the same. I think what's unique about this year with these two elite tight ends, and I'll throw in George Kittle, is they project well versus their ADP, where Dalton Kincaid last year and some of the other guys, they were terrible projection picks at cost. So this year, elite tight end makes a lot more sense than in previous. I would just say if I know that the tight ends in rounds 14 through 18 are also awesome picks at cost, that to me is the bigger debate. I don't have anything bad to say about Trey McBride and Brock Bowers individually or about their team or anything like that. They're in beautiful setups. They're not going to be stone cold bust at all. They'll be right in the same range as they should be. And I feel way more comfortable with these guys than I have with previous elite tight ends.
You could convince me to say bad things about Trey McBride. You could convince me to say the guy has never scored a touchdown in his life. Dating back to Trey McBride's freshman season at Colorado State and his 3 years in the National Football League, the total number of touchdowns he scored, I believe, is 11. The entire time. I need to go back and add it up. I know it's the funniest thing is that he had 103 receptions his final season at Colorado State with 1 touchdown. We are in a little bit of a slappy system here. We've got Okay, we are up. Pickens, we can do Hampton, we can do Metcalf, we could do Flowers.
I like
Pickens
Metcalf or Pickens. Either
Metcalf.
one.
Metcalf is fine by me. I don't have very much of him, and